podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello everyone, I'm Chris Wynn and welcome to Howay the podcast, and well done to you for joining us as we gather not long after the final whistle following Sunderland's 2-0 defeat at Oxford United, which makes it our fourth loss on the bounce and fifth in the last 8 games, if you're counting. But thankfully it's not all doom and gloom, simply because I didn't draw the short straw alone, as I am very pleased to have the company of Jonny to make sense of it all. All right, Matt?
Well, all right might be a stretch after sitting through 90 minutes of that, but I'm present and correct anyway.
Well, that's it. Where's your head at after watching a performance like that? Because look, let's be honest, it's not easy, is it?
No. I'm trying to just take a step back and try and look at the bigger picture, which, you know, we're still in the playoffs. We're still going to finish fourth. You know, the world hasn't ended, but, you know, you're struggling mightily to try and pick out positives out of that performance, aren't you? You know, I think you have to fall back on the season as a whole and what we've got coming up to try and, you know, keep your eyes open and keep your head off the desk at the minute, because as you pointed out, the form's just, it's dropped off a cliff, hasn't it? It's really been poor, and that was just another lifeless performance, really, in what's becoming a bit of a string of lifeless performances, which isn't really what you want to be, you know, watching and sitting through as Sunderland fans. But yeah, I'm just trying to, you know, keep telling myself, don't worry, we're still fourth, we can still go up, everything's still going to be fine. But you know, we'll see, won't we, over the coming weeks?
No, that's it. And I don't think that's the last time we'll say something along those lines during this podcast. But look, let's get into the game. We'll deal with the game, and then we'll kind of come back on to basically where we stand at the moment with one game left. But to start with, the starting 11, Mayenda, you know, Labrie said he was in the concussion protocol, so he wasn't involved, which makes sense. And I'm quite glad of that fact when you think in hindsight. Serkin was on the bench, but he kind of stuck to what he said he was going to do in midweek. And I think he said it even earlier, where he said he's going to try and ramp it up for those 2 games. Now, looking at the starting lineup, pretty much the strongest lineup he could have put out if you consider that Serkin's not fully fit and we're still nursing him back. But do you think, you know, by putting that side out, and again, we're speaking in hindsight, so it's easy, but putting that side out and seeing what he said about ramping it up, that he kind of put himself into a bit of a pickle by saying all of that, because he's blocked himself into a corner by, like, you know, that we know now because of the performance that we put in.
Yeah, it does feel a little bit like he made a bit of a rod for his own back with those comments. And like you say, you know, we're looking at it in hindsight now after the game, but I just think it was always a possibility, wasn't it, that we were going to struggle to motivate ourselves and get us up for the game as Oxford were going to, because, you know, they're fighting for their lives. And I believe that result's actually mathematically clinched their survival, hasn't it? Or as near as can be. Like they're basically out of it now either way, I think.
Yeah, they're 5 points clear now.
Yeah, there you go. So, you know, that's the carrot that they had dangling in front of them was to secure the championship status for another season. That's going to be a huge motivator. And we now just parking the debate of what makes a game important and how you can get up for it. You know, just mathematically, there's nothing riding on the game for us. So, yeah, with that always being something that should have been in the back of the minds, I do think it might have been a little bit misguided for him to speak so strongly about it. But having said that, he is only the head coach. You know, he can't go on the pitch and run about for them and put tackles in and play accurate passes. So he's almost fulfilled his end of the bargain by picking that team, because I totally agree that is the strongest team we could have picked it at the minute with the injuries that we do have, the few that are still trickling back in. So I don't disagree at all with the way that he approached the game in terms of selection and tactics and stuff like that. But yeah, I do think you can maybe start to raise a few questions about his media handling, which is something he has been quite good at most of the season, I would stress. But yeah, just a couple of little chinks in the armour, I would say, at this point.
Yeah, it was interesting. I think it was, from my point of view, like you said, he's been good, but that was the first time I think he's actually made a statement to the media where he said, "I'm going to do this," which made it even more strange. And it'll be really interesting. Martin and Gav are going to be on, I think, with Brett on the longer extended kind of reaction pod, and I'm sure they'll talk about what the manager says after the game, because we are literally recording minutes after the final whistle. So this is kind of about as raw as you get in terms of reaction to the game. But I think the first 5 minutes for me, that kind of told you everything how the game was going to be. And you've already mentioned Oxford were right up for it. And I talked to George Ellick during the week on the preview. He said, there was going to be a really good atmosphere because, they, as they did in the end, they could keep themselves safe. But the 5 minutes just said everything. I mean, it wasn't really about tactics and this, that it told you in those 5 minutes. It was just about Oxford wanted it more, and they pinned us in straight away in that first 5 minutes. And you could see what was coming after that.
Yeah, it felt like the polar opposite to me of the Bristol City first 5 minutes, where in that game I thought until the red card, we looked like we were making all the running and, we looked quite intense. I thought we genuinely looked like the team from the start of the season. This game was, the total opposite of that. And I agree with you there completely. I think you could just see in the first 5 minutes who was up for it and who wasn't. And it really did set the tone for the whole first half. Without wanting to jump ahead, I think we maybe improved in spells in the second half, and that's maybe being a bit generous. But
it wasn't hard.
Yeah. When you set the benchmark as that first half, it doesn't take much to climb above it. Like,
but yeah, I mean, and what came out of that first 5 minutes, it kind of ended. That first 5 minutes, and I'm kind of talking about this because we'll be coming on to something else, as everyone will probably be waiting for us to talk about. But I want to slightly balance it out, because after that 5 minutes of pressure, we couldn't get out. Quick start from Oxford, as was said, but it came to a halt basically when there was that save from Patterson. There was a shot from the edge of the box, and to be fair, I mean, I'm going to say it might sound harsh, but it's not all down to him. But it's the first time I'd seen Patterson really make a save where you went, oof, that's a brilliant save. That almost that you think it's beyond the routine type of save, but it was a great save.
Yeah, no, it was. And he had to be alert because, it's early on in the game. You haven't had time to settle yourself and kind of, get used to the ebb and flow stuff. So credit to him there for that save. And it's interesting because it almost does sound harsh, doesn't it, saying it's the only good save that he's made recently? But I do know what you mean. It's one of the few where he makes the save and you think, even if that had gone in, we maybe aren't blaming him.
Yeah.
Which,
or maybe there's that 5% where you thought, actually, he's done really well to get to it. Like, it looked like it was going right in the top corner.
Yeah, and I think it helps that it's, at full stretch, one hand tips it. Like, they always make it look a lot better.
Hollywood, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. He was just doing it all for the cameras. Yeah, he just needs a reputation boost.
Exactly, that's it. But the other thing I wanted to mention this for, because, and again, I'm not kind of trying to save him because of the conversation we're about to have, but because I thought it was interesting in the context of the game of what we were trying to do. But a minute later, actually, Patterson from a goal kick hit one with the outside of his boot and then put Isidore clean through on goal. Now, there's two things. The reason I wanted to mention this, there's two things about this. The first one being Patterson's distribution is, I think, poor most of the time. But this was an unbelievable ball through from a goal kick with the outside of his foot, I think it was. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is it all went through. And I just, at no point did I think, he's looking like he's got conviction that he's going to go on and score here. And he looked leggy. He wasn't pulling away from what looked like a slow defender. And in the end, sort of looked like he was tripping over the ball, and the defender easily got there and knocked it out for a corner in the end. But I just thought with Isidore, I wanted something else from him. You've been watching Mayenda go through, clean through on goal, or take players on or turn players in recent weeks. And to have that contrast with Isidore there going through, they almost looks like he's carrying a knock or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's the reason I think it stands out so much, like visually when you watch him, is because he used to look so purposeful, like almost to a fault, where as soon as he got the ball, his first instinct and second and third instincts were get a shot off. Sometimes the ball would come to him and you'd actually be thinking, Wilson, mate, just take a touch there, actually, and then get the shot off. But he was just, at any given opportunity, he was letting fly. And yeah, I thought today he was slow to look like he even wanted to have a go, which I think is very uncharacteristic of the Wilson Isidore we've seen for particularly that sort of middle period of the season where he went on that run, culminating around the time of Middlesbrough away. And it's something I think where him and Mayenda have almost swapped places a bit, where I think Mayenda early on, he had a lot of indecision and maybe didn't quite have that sort of go-to movement that he now seems to have, where he does seem a lot more confident getting past defenders and really zeroing in on the goal. And now I think Mayenda, he does seem to be purposeful and he does drive forward like with a real idea in mind. And yeah, Isidore for me, I couldn't agree more. I think today he looked a little lost at times, almost as if he didn't really understand where he was meant to fit in that front line, which is a bit of a worry, I think.
Well, that's it. I mean, when the ball was played forward, he didn't seem to be kind of looking for it much. He didn't seem to be looking to hold it up much. He didn't seem to be turning. And, you know, we've seen him do these things and we've seen him being good at it. I mean, is it, from my point of view, you know, should we be worried if, actually, I mean, Mayenda's concussion, so he's probably fit enough. It's just a precaution that he didn't play, which I'm very glad actually that he didn't play. But, you know, if Mayenda gets injured in that last game, you know, I can't say at the moment, you know, looking back at his performances over the last couple of months, that I'm all that confident about Isidore leading the line.
No, my confidence in Isidore's drained quite substantially over the last few weeks, actually. And I've been a massive kind of, proponent. I've been really in Isidore's corner, is what I was trying to say there.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah, exactly. But the reason that I worry so much about him is because, look, we all know he's got talent. We all know he can finish. But when he doesn't get a chance, it's really becoming starkly obvious that he doesn't actually offer anything else to the team at all, which is, you can get away with that a bit when the team as a whole are performing and winning games anyway. But going into the playoffs now, with the run of form we're on and how tight it looks like it's going to be, and the potential, maybe 2 legs against Coventry, we could end up playing Middlesbrough. Sheffield United are a good side. And these are going to be games where we need everybody to contribute, whether it's goals and assists or tackles or, covering ground, whatever it might be. And I just think Isidore recently, as I say, it's becoming very, very visibly obvious that, like, he doesn't even go in for 50-50s really anymore. He doesn't. It's not just a case of not throwing himself about. He doesn't even look like he wants to approach a challenge with a defender, whether that's aerial, whether it's on the ground. The only thing I think I've seen him try over the past month or so is when he tries to nip in front of a defender at the front post to try and get a toe on something that's being cut back. But aside from those, I think it's put in sharp relief as well by Mayenda's performances. Not to talk too much about a player who didn't play, but whereas he is full-blooded and he does give defenders a really torrid time with or without the ball, I think today was a real big example of where exactly Isidore lacks at the minute. And as you say, look, if Mayenda were to be injured going into the playoffs and Isidore was the only option, it's starting to look like a real problem. And, fingers crossed he gets a goal next week against QPR and gets a monkey off his back and settles our nerves. But at the minute, it really isn't looking great.
Yeah, he needs that goal, doesn't he? So after that kind of initial kind of burst from Oxford coming out the blocks, we started to settle down. We got back into it. We started getting a little bit of possession. But, I'm just looking at the notes that I wrote down literally right before the opening goal. I was saying that we were taking too much time on the ball. We were taking too many touches. When we were trying to pass it, we were poor in possession. We were getting the 5-yard, the 10-yard passes wrong. We were passing to people who were under pressure. Dan Neil was particularly guilty of giving the ball away in the middle of the park and playing little daft balls into people's feet who again were under pressure. But the other thing we were doing, which looked like a tactic, which I wanted to kind of focus on a little bit. You're talking about when Isidore went through from Patterson, but how much we played that long ball. And I don't think I know we've tried to hit teams on the break, but I don't think I've ever seen us this season play that long ball as much as we did against Oxford.
No, and it's strange, isn't it? Because as you said about if it's on the break, that's one thing. You see 50, 60 yards of space in behind and you just want to penetrate, then, it's a good option. But it felt like it was, as you say, a bit of a tactic and a bit of a go-to for O'Nien in particular to get the ball, hold on to it for 5 or 10 seconds, which gives them the opportunity to really get in shape and then try and play one, which that does leave you scratching your head, because the whole benefit of a pass like that is to exploit a bit of space down the flanks and in behind. But if you let them settle into their shape first and then try and play it to Enzo Olafay, Patrick Roberts or Wilson Isidore, none of whom are particularly aerial threats, it does just leave you wondering what the intention was there, like what the picture was in their heads as they were about to play that pass. What did they think it was going to result in? Because it was baffling, to be honest. And the sheer number of times we tried it was, it leads me to think that you're right in that it was something they were told to do. Yeah,
it was just bizarre. It was like, it's funny because you mentioned the get out thing there, the get out ball. And I remember back in the day under Reedy that, when people were under pressure, it was like a big diagonal ball up to Quinney. But, but at least there was somebody there. But in this case, it was like knocking it up to space. And
there's a bit of logic to it if you've got a big man up front, but we're a team who relies massively on like balls in behind and stuff along the floor. So it didn't seem to me to make sense. And the other thing, just to touch on something else you said, was you singled out Dan Neil for making a lot of these, 5 and 10 yard passes astray in the middle of midfield, and it was a tough day for him. Mm-hmm. But what really got to me in the first half especially was how many times, even in the back four, they were trying to just knock little passes like almost around the corner to each other when Oxford were pressing us quite high. And the word that came to my mind immediately was lackadaisical. Yeah. It really just felt like the players kind of thought, it's only Oxford, I know they've got something to play for, but we can knock the ball about and we're good enough to do that. And it just wasn't coming off, and we put ourselves in trouble far more often than we needed to, just by not taking enough care with, never mind the final pass, it was the first pass at times. We'd win the ball back, and before we've even managed to stick 2 passes together, you've got players, little, not quite little flicks and tricks, but, little almost no-look passes and stuff from full-back to centre-back, and I'm just thinking, that's not the way to play football in the Championship. You'll get punished for that, and, lo and behold, it's ended up proven correct.
Well, that's it. And we'll go on to the opening goal. It was just around the half-hour mark. And for me, this goal pretty much mirrored how the game had gone before that, because you've got Mepham giving a really stupid free kick away in midfield. He gets too tight. I mean, he complained to the referee, but that, it's a daft free kick all day long. I mean, we'd be screaming for that. But the thing is, for me, you watch, and I was watching this, and I had this thought genuinely as the ball was floating in, that we clearly weren't set up, and we weren't kind of looking the right way. I looked at Trey Hume as the ball was floated in. He was looking in the opposite direction. He wasn't even looking at the ball. Then when the ball actually got there, the player who, I can't even remember who scored, but whoever scored it, he got in between Mepham and O'Nien, who were marking nobody but space and didn't actually want to make the challenge. And everything about it was just so easy for Oxford. We didn't make it difficult. We gave them the free kick too easy. We didn't set up to defend the free kick. It was a floated ball in, which, you should deal with no problem, because it wasn't like it landed on the 6-yard box and it was a fantastic ball in. We had plenty of time to watch the ball come in, because it was a floated ball, which, defenders should have their eyes on. Defenders have almost got time to get into space and win the ball. And everything about it just seemed all wrong.
I think if you asked a Championship manager to make a video compilation of sort of cardinal sins of defending set pieces, you could knock up 3 or 4 of them just from that free kick watching us defend there. Yeah. I'm glad you pointed out Hume facing the wrong direction when it came in, because when I clocked that on the replay, I just, like, me jaw dropped. I couldn't believe it. And for such a good defender as Hume as well, who that's, he's hardly like a fly-in fullback who's more about going forward. He should know that that's unacceptable. And the marking from Mepham and O'Nien, I almost don't have words. Like, the lad who ends up scoring, he has both centre-halves, one in front of him, one behind him, no more than a yard or two away each, and they've let him have a free header, basically unopposed, in our own box. It's inexcusable, that. I mean, Mepham makes the first mistake in terms of the delivery coming in, because his eyes on the ball, but he's totally lost. I think it's Nelson who scores. He's totally lost Nelson behind him. He doesn't realise where he is. And then O'Nien behind, I can't tell whether he's also ball watching or whether he's, distracted by not realising that Nelson's now coming to him. But O'Nien has a good chance as well to then take a step forward and challenge for the header. And he just lets it pass as well. And yeah, for two centre-halves who've played as well as they have for us this season as Mepham and O'Nien, to just not even end up putting a challenge in between them and letting the guy who scores literally be sandwiched between their bodies, I think it's unexplainable, really, isn't it?
Well, this is what I was about to ask you, because, we talked about the form and, we've talked about players coming in, players coming out. One of the constants in this, and I was looking again, if you look at if you look at that run in the games in it, I mean, you look at games, the Norwich game and West Brom game I look back to in particular. But one thing that I remember seeing in quite a few of these games that was that Mepham and O'Nien were the best two players on the pitch. Now you see instances like this, and again, do we just put it down to that? That kind of pre-season effect where it's like, that they're not kind of, their heads aren't completely focused in it. They're not fully focused on, they've got one eye on that game, on that first leg, because, I don't want to get too worried about specific players in terms of form, but O'Nien and Mepham have been those two constants where you've been saying, well, those two played well. And Labrie seems to have kept those solid as well, where it's like not bringing them two out because they want to keep that partnership with the goalkeeper and keep that solid. But on the basis of defending on, it's one free kick we're talking about, but you don't want them getting into bad habits like that, do you?
No, and to condense an extremely long argument between about 12 of us in the group chat during the match, I think there's a difference between mistakes you make quality-wise and a lack of application or effort or intensity, right? I can forgive, to a degree, a bit of a lack of intensity. We've already spoke about how Oxford had everything to play for, and we basically don't, in terms of points and the league table, right? That to one side, I think those mistakes, like the likes that Mepham and O'Nien were making today, like for that free kick and other times in the game, those worry me a lot more, because those are decisions that you make, and you wouldn't expect the decision making to be affected by, the status of the game or who we're playing or what point of the season it is. And look, like you say, it is only one free kick, and it looks particularly horrendous because it's ended up, resulting in a goal. But that worries me more, like I say, because I think that doesn't depend on, having to be more or less motivated for a game or anything like that. Like those should just be basics. They should be totally without thinking, I think, particularly for somebody of Chris Mepham's quality. O'Nien as well, I think, is absolutely brilliant. But Mepham's played, plenty of games in the Premier League where you get less time to react, and it's even more physical again, and the players you're playing are of a higher level of quality. Like, he should know better than that. And I think, look, it's one game, and as you said, they have been some of the better players in this run, even as we've struggled to pick up points and put performances together. So we shouldn't panic too much. But if we see something like that against QPR as well, that's when I think the alarm bells need to start clanging.
Yeah. Because, I mean, if you're looking at kind of potential motivation, I mean, we're picking out Mepham and O'Nien, but we've mentioned Trey Hume, who was facing the wrong way. But actually, I think across the 90 minutes, Trey Hume had a bit of a shocker as well. But the rest of the first half played out, possibly the worst 45 minutes of the season, and that's possibly saying something, but I'd put it up there, certainly. But then you think, right, well, get them in at half time, say, tell them it's not good enough. We come out and, we keep the ball, even if we're not that fussed about the result, bit of showboating, keep the ball, let's just play around with it. Let's practice a few things. 2 minutes into the second half, again, bit of a daft free kick, depending on the way you look at it. And I'll let you get into that one because I'm just looking at your face there. But then a 20-yard free kick from Brannigan. And I mean, I don't think this is one mistake. I think this is two from Patterson because he parries the first one. And I think that the effort to get to the second one's just poor. And, that his reaction to get up and it's almost like half-hearted to get to it. Like he's almost accepted they're already scored. Instead of busting a gut right, I'm saving this next one, this follow-up. It's like, I've already accepted they've scored. I'll dive, but it's a goal. And again, it's just got that feeling of being half-arsed about the whole thing.
Yeah, look, the free kick, we can debate whether or not it actually should have been a foul or a free kick. I think it was pretty soft, but again, it goes back to being a bit lackadaisical and just a bit daft. Like, there's no need to give the ref a decision to make there, I don't think. It's not like he was one-on-one clean through about to go in and have a one-on-one with Patterson and we were all at sea. It was just a couple of minutes into the second half. Like, as you say, we've gone in 1-0 down, so bit of a kick up the arse and how are lads, get out there and start putting it right. And I just think that, again, a little like the first half, it felt a bit like starting as we ended up meaning to go on. It's just a frustratingly poor way to concede a goal in the end, isn't it? And look, getting on to Patterson, I mean, the only bit of credit I can give him is he saves it at the first attempt. At least he does actually stop it going in the goal.
It's not a good free kick though, initially, is it?
No, it's not. It's not like it's right in the corner, is it?
I'm sure it bounces before it gets to him, doesn't it?
Yeah, he makes a save in the most literal sense of the word, making a save. He actually gets his body in the way. But I think you said that it's almost like he was a bit half-assed and sort of thought, oh well, it's going in anyway, so I'll make the second dive. I almost wonder whether it's a bit more like not panic, but he's been under so much pressure and has had so many questions. I wonder if he's almost kind of like half frozen in, oh God, now I need to make another save. Like, oh, it's a one-on-one. Oh, like, do you know what I mean? Like, well, it's.
Do you think sometimes when it's like that, do you think, we talked about that save in the first 5 minutes because I wanted to give him like some credit for that. But do you think those reactionary tough ones in maybe the mental state you might be in are easier than, when an easy one comes in, it's like, oh shit, I've got to make sure I save this. Whereas the ones you don't think about, he's, the worldie's in the top corner, he can pull off because there's not much pressure on it.
Yeah, almost like the equivalent of, when a striker's on a goal drought and he had too much time to think about that. That's why he's missed that one. It almost feels a little bit like that in that I think it's one of them where you think, oh, it's bouncing 2 yards in front of us. Oh, I've got to save this now. And then, he's just kind of, I mean, how do you even describe the movement he made? I was going to say he flung himself at it, but that's not accurate. He sort of
fell to the ground. The first one, he fell to the ground. I mean, but the second one, he just kind of fell back and like, they've scored.
It's like he's fallen while raising his arms to almost try and make himself big, but smaller at the same time. It was a really, really strange looking attempt at a save, but I don't want to hammer him too much because he's a local lad and everything, but it was really, really bad goalkeeping for that second goal.
Well, again, like I said, we're giving that credit for the early save, and let's come on because I was thinking, right, okay, 2-0 down, like come on, kick up the arse, and it's almost like, right, actually, let's give ourselves a test. We're 2-0 down. As a captain, maybe Dan Neil or someone on the pitch, one of the senior players, 09 or whatever. Say, come on, like basically now's our target to get back in the game, and now we pick it up. It's 2-0 down, but then a few minutes later, Oxford go cling through on goal, and I think actually the lad who went clean through on goal, I can't remember who it was. Didn't take much notice from an Oxford point of view who it was, but he went through and should have scored. He should have made it 3-0. And I actually think Patterson made a decent save, although I do think the shot was actually going wide, but Patterson wasn't to know that, but he still made a good save. But, does that tell you everything about the mentality of the players that, we're going 2-0 down. There's 40 minutes still to go. And, 2 minutes after conceding a second goal, they're going cling through on goal almost without a challenge, put on them.
It does. I think it sums up the whole game and basically the whole sort of last month or so of Sunderland, doesn't it? Like that lack of, not just lack of intensity, but the lack of ability to recognise kind of shifts in a game and shifts in momentum and stuff. Which, look, part of that's come through chopping and changing teams and having players missing and lots of other factors. But it does feel like we've really struggled to be able to keep our fingers on the pulse and recognise when there are periods in the game where we've got to react and we've got to come out fighting and got to come out swinging. And as you say, that's a perfect little microcosm of it, where we've just conceded the second. There's still time left to get something. We need to get the away fans on side and, get a bit of atmosphere into the game. And it was just totally flat again. I think a better side or a more informed side recognises that moment and really starts turning it on. But it's just something that seems to have totally deserted us at the minute.
Yeah. And it was like 5-10 minutes later, which was our pretty much, I'd say our only real opportunity, which Lafayette had the ball on the left-hand side and he dinked it onto Chris Riggs' head. Good header, to be fair, from just inside the box, and it hit the post. But one of the reasons I wanted to mention this, obviously, because it was pretty much the only chance we had, so I thought I'd mention it. But yeah, the reason I wanted to mention it is because looking at the match stats, you've got 69% possession of the football, and you finish the game against Oxford with apparently 10 shots, although I can't remember them. But more importantly, 0 shots on target. Now, again, to have 70% possession and not get a shot on target in the whole game, again, we're talking about the game in the broad context of what's going on. And again, does this tell you where the players' heads are at?
It does, and I think, like I was just saying before, it's one of those elements of the game that I think we're really struggling with at the minute, is recognizing the situation and adapting a bit. Because I think when you get that far into the game and you've had no shots on target, but you've had all the ball, you've got to recognize, like, let's just have a couple of shots from distance. Let's give the ball to Job and just let one fly, even just to get the ball onto the keeper's gloves, just to give him something to think about. Let them know that there's some level of threat coming, because the longer it went, the less we looked like scoring and the more comfortable Oxford were looking, purely because I think they were just recognising, like, they're not even shooting. I think those 10 shots, I reckon probably 7 or 8 of them were Patrick Roberts having a shot that was blocked 1 yard later off a defender's ankles. And some of them...
With 0 power as well.
Yeah, I was going to say some of them may or may not have ended up actually reaching the target. But yeah, I just think there was a bit of inflexibility about us today. It really did feel like they were trying things that weren't working in all areas of the pitch and not having the ability to then change and try something else. There was, I'd say you could argue, a lack of sort of player-led leadership, I think, is how I'd maybe sum it up, because, we hear them talk about it in the Premier League all the time and on Sky Sports, oh, well, the manager tells you this, but sometimes you can sit in for 10 minutes or sometimes you go along for 10 minutes and take the sting out. And I think we really let ourselves down in that sense today, where the players, whatever the game plan was from Lebris and whatever they've been told through the week, when you're out there over that white line for 90 minutes, there are times where you've got to make decisions, and I think there just wasn't enough of that.
Yeah. Well, look, the game ended, lost 2-0, as we've been saying. The performance was awful. And look, we are, I'm going to, when I say we, I mean me and you, Johnny. I think we are two people, I think, who are looking at the bigger picture. But I'm going to play devil's advocate because I can, because I'm asking the question. So I'm going to be a bit of a bugger and put this question to you, because we can see the big picture, we can see the prize ahead of us, but you've got a lot of fans travelling to Oxford. When you're talking about levels of performance and when you're talking about a little bit of an intensity and winning those challenges and doing the basics, do those fans not deserve a little bit more?
Oh, 100%. Don't get us wrong, right? I like to look at the bigger picture, and I think you can excuse certain things and you can look past certain things. But at the end of the day, like you say, there are fans who've paid good money to go there and given up, a whole day out of the weekend, they work hard 5 days a week or 6 days a week or whatever. They've turned up on a day off. They've gone down to support Sunderland and they've come away having watched an absolutely abject performance in the end. So from that point of view, it isn't good enough. And I can excuse a little bit of a lack of intensity because the game had nothing riding on it in terms of the league table. But that doesn't mean that you don't go in for your 50-50s. It doesn't mean that you don't, give everything in a sprint when you're trying to get on the end of a ball in the box or trying to catch somebody who's running through. Those things need to be non-negotiable. Like, there's a difference between that extra % or two that can get you over the line in a real, important game versus games like today. But that, you still need a bare minimum level of commitment and effort and quality, because it wasn't just that the players looked, a little half-assed and a little bit, leggy and lethargic. As I say, I go back to like Mepham and 09 for that first goal. That isn't a lack of effort, or I hope it isn't. That's bad decision making, and it's just bad football. So yeah, look, I totally understand the point of view of anyone who says that wasn't good enough and that the run of form generally has been, way below par, because it has been. I just think that it, where I then disagree with a lot of people, I think, is when you're looking forward. I just don't see it as being something that's going to be the making or breaking of the playoffs. That's where I look to. But in terms of a a league game of football that Sunderland want to go and win, it wasn't good enough. And I feel for any of the fans who were in that away end today, because they absolutely did not get the money's worth in terms of a Sunderland performance.
Yeah, but that the fact is, though, that we're going through this pain now, and it is painful because it's not fun to lose games, and it's a confusing time because we, as a supporter of a club, you just don't want to lose games. So we're confused between not wanting to lose, worrying about the playoffs, worrying about are we in the right place. But the fact is, Johnny, that we come out and let's say let's say that the best scenario happens in that first leg. We come out and we blitz that first leg 2 or 3-0 or whatever, and come, to take back the Stadium of Light. All this is going to be forgotten.
Oh, 100%. It's the same as anything in football, isn't it? You're only as good as your last game. You can talk about runs of form, you can talk about tactics and systems and managers and coaches and, everything else. But at the end of the day, you're measured on what you do on the pitch. And at the moment, that's not great for us. We don't really want to be judged off these last few games. But as you say, come the end of that first leg of the playoffs, if we have turned up and put a performance in a 1-2 or 3-0, everybody's going to be chuffed. Everybody's going to be positive looking at the second leg. And we're all going to be, in our group chats and on social media and in the pub, we're all just going to be saying, I tell you what, we're class, aren't we? We're unreal. Yeah. We're going to get promoted and I can't wait to go to Wembley. So yeah, it's just such a strange one, isn't it? Because we're not used to being in this position where it's all calm before the storm. We're used to being right there in the eye of the storm with chaos unfolding around us at all times. So yeah. I totally get why people are finding it hard to deal with. But yeah, like you say, look, come the end of the first leg of the playoffs, hopefully we'll be all smiles.
Yeah. The life of a Sunderland fan, isn't it?
It's never boring.
That's it. The beauty is in the struggle and all of that. But just to end on, Johnny, because the league's tightened up. Bristol City have obviously got Leeds to play on Monday. They're already up. They're already celebrating. There'll be a party time at Ellen Road. So they've got a game in hand. But there's 3 points separating Bristol City, Coventry, Millwall and Borough after this round of games. Who's your money on?
I said Bristol City and Coventry the other day, so I'm going to stick to it just because I don't want it to be Middlesbrough, because I can't stand me Middlesbrough supporting family getting excited about the playoffs. So selfishly, I'm going to say them. I don't think Millwall will make it. I think it's a step too far for them. So I'll say Bristol and Coventry.
Bristol Coventry. Okay, well, I've been saying for weeks I'm worried about Alex Neil, and my worry's getting worse and worse. But we'll see how it goes. But nice one. Thanks again, Johnny. Always a pleasure, mate.
Aye, cheers, Chris. I'd say always a pleasure, but maybe today that might be the first one where having to watch the football first wasn't the enjoyable bit. Well,
to be fair, I've ended up at the end of this recording feeling a lot better than at the start, so I hope everyone who's listening feels the same way. But on that note, thanks again for everyone for listening. I hope you got all the way through it. I hope we cheered you up a little bit. If not, we've got loads for you to listen back to. If you've just jumped on the How We're the Podcast bandwagon with this pod, we've got interviews with former players. We've got journalists talking about the past and the present, as well as reaction and news roundups covering the latest at Sunderland AFC. We will, of course, have all the build-up to our final game of the regulation season against QPR this week, so keep an eye out on all the usual places for the next pod, which should be Gav, Martin and Brett, I think, who should be doing an extended review of the Oxford game if you really want to put yourself through it. But I'm sure they're going to have some good points and looking forward to the playoffs, of course. But from us, bye for now.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.